the movement. Tomorrow belongs to God. Nothing can break me, nothing can bend me, nothing can bring me down.
Second VP, Mr. Pele at the FCIB, the National Treasurer, Mrs. Mojisola Bakari, FCIB, the Registrar Chief Executive, and FinTech certification, while optimizing technology for financial inclusion and growth, expansion of trade and finance collaboration with Afrexim Bank, IFC, and other relevant agencies to position banks and Nigerian business community to take advantage of emerging opportunity, especially around the African continental free trade area. The remote online profiling platform was also introduced and successfully implemented our certification program in October 2022. The completion of exceptional value to our esteemed stakeholders. Please be rest assured, as always, that the recommendations emerging from this important event will be formulated into a communique which will be circulated to all major stakeholders in the economy to influence policy at the national level. At the economic outlook at 2022, fund the thrust of the budget highlights that we are seeing in 2023 at the national level. And that's how it. Once again, I welcome you to this thought-provoking event and wish you an enlightening and productive session. Thank you so much and God bless.
In 2018, when the Brookings institution rolled out their report, and we had a simple question. That is being driven by Overseas Development Institute of UK. That's one. Then McKinsey is a very popular consultancy, we all know the name. They came out with a survey report recently that instead of looking at poverty from the perspective of countries, now we can look at it from the perspective of communities. So they broke the entire world into 40,000 communities. And then that study revealed that there are poverty pockets everywhere in the world. So that it is a misnomer to label any country as poverty center. The third one I want to mention is a book just published by a lecturer at the University of Maryland in College Park in the US. The author sent me a summary of the book just this Saturday, and it is a fresh look at extreme poverty. That oftentimes what we claim to be extreme poverty, especially in the less developed countries and developing economies and emerging markets like Nigeria, is also a misplaced conclusion. And so he gave a simple illustration. If you want to buy taco in India, it will cost you 10 cents for what we call a fee. You buy the same quantity of taco in the US, it will cost you $10. And he says, so for the person who can afford taco in India, you now say his income level is very low, therefore he's poor. Meanwhile, the same taco, the same quantity in the US will cost $10. So now, in that particular book, which was just published, it came out just this Saturday, he also gave a picture of a need to look at poverty in a fresh manner. So on that basis, I like what we normally do here on this platform, and that is to look at the economic challenges facing Nigeria from a fresh perspective. So those are the high points that we talk to. I have a deck of slides that we share with everybody here. We all have that. As we normally joke here, we say at FSBA, we say that any document we issue out, you have freedom. There's no patent rights. You have freedom to use whatever the content is, as if it's your own personal property. Okay? So Ukraine, largely, and of course Russia. We also realize that Russia is a key factor in the manufacturing of automobiles, because there's a particular precious metal called palladium that is solely exported by Russia. We now began to see that, of course, to the Europeans, Russia is the basic source of energy. So all that Russia needed to do was to close the tap, and then Europe will begin to suffer. So we profiled the implications of all that, which we now see as energy crisis. We talked about inflation. We also looked back at the pandemic, which is the second global disruption. And we said that yes, when the pandemic happened, many countries their economies went into recession. Nigeria didn't escape it anyway, like many other countries around the world. But then, in response to that, two things happened all over the world. Massive fiscal stimulus, and then accommodative monetary policy. That happened all around the world. So 2021, many economies recovered. And then we began to talk, we said it last year on this platform, Tani, and we said, most likely, the massive injections that made the economies to recover strongly in 2021 will likely trigger stagflation, because inflation rate will go up, and then with the rollback of accommodative monetary policy and now withdrawal of fiscal stimulus, economies will slow down to their normal pace. Once they slow down to their normal pace, inflation wouldn't come down so quickly. That was a bitter lesson the managers of the US economy learned. Because initially they made a mistake, thinking that inflation was temporary. And so the Fed did not respond quickly. But when they now discovered that it was like a permanent feature, so they now began to also apply monetary policy tools. So then the pandemic today is still a concern, because a fresh variant of COVID-19 has now started also causing trouble all around the world. But even beyond that, ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic we saw in 2020 came a century after the last one we saw. But there is a conversation as we are speaking now that the next one is likely to be in 2025. That's in 2 years' time. So that means in terms of the economy, in terms of your business, one of the key things we'll be talking about is resilience. How do you be resilient in your business? That is one of the core 5 themes being examined at Davos as we speak here. That's at the World Economic Forum going on in Davos. So one of the themes is resilience. We mentioned something here also, interestingly, General Master of this platform is also one other theme of the conversation, and that is reimagining. Because we mentioned 4 things here last year that businesses should do. One of them was resilience, second one was sustainability, the third one we said you should reimagine your business model. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is being discussed as we speak in Davos, which means most of the things we raise here become part of global discourse by political, business, and economic leaders. And so, the other thing we need to also worry about, of course, is macroeconomic stability. The president mentioned that in his paper, so I won't talk much about that. And we all know what we have gone through in terms of exchange rate. But now something we also put forward here is that we should not be carried away about the narratives about Nigeria. Now, many times, what we see as challenges here are also happening elsewhere around the world. Many currencies of countries in 2022 also lost value against the US dollar. In fact, most of them, 20% lost diminution value against the US dollar. So it was not a problem peculiar to Nigeria, but again, a reflection of the nature of our economy. And that is where I'm going to put it together with a wrap up shortly. And that is, if we import 1.9 trillion naira worth of goods and services monthly, that's what we do in Nigeria. And I'm quoting official data, which is trade statistics captured officially. You know, in the World Bank language, we call it official statistics. Now, what they have way back in 1989 as a research economist. So we always make reference to official statistics. Okay, that's the official figure, 1.9 trillion naira every month we spend on imports. So which will give us an idea, or let me say a pointer, to one of the things that can redeem our economy. We've said it repeatedly, and happily the conversation is now catching on at the global stage. And that is, we can never solve the problem of exchange value of the naira by simply following the orthodox recommendation of IMF. And that is to remove the premium. About 4 years ago at this platform, we showed a chart from 1970 till date of what has happened to the exchange value of the naira. Because every time you compare the official rate, central bank, with the roadside rate, we commonly call parallel market, we generate a premium. The textbook recommendation of IMF is cut off that premium by central bank devaluing the naira. We've done that repeatedly over the years because of an issue with the structure of our economy. Largely import dependent, that is one. Marginal propensity to consume very high. Nigerians will buy anything. We did a check recently. One of the foreign airlines, I won't tell you which of them, the two, you know there are two British airlines that fly Nigeria London, okay, every day. One of them, we put a question to Nigeria. Why is your ticket from Lagos to Heathrow, London so expensive compared to other countries in the world where you also fly 6 hours? And the GM of that particular airline said, it is because any price you put our ticket, Nigeria die. This is fact. It is true. Because we check the figures and then we put the question to the man. And the man said, any price you put the tickets out, Nigerians buy. So why should we worry? So now that is just a pointer to what we have said, and that is the attraction that Nigeria is. So that is why they also want to invest here. Then we don't see those things. Because many of us give attention more to the challenges rather than the opportunities. So where are the opportunities? That is what is important to all of us on the one hand, and also important to our policymakers for now to strengthen the connection between the opportunities and the business community. And you don't need to go far with that. When you look at, let me just tell you the slide so that we can go to that. Yes, that's slide number 16. You will get the detailed document. Slide number 16, please. Now, we developed that slide in DA Consult about 9-10 years ago to show something that the Nigerian economy is diversified. Because people often say the economy is not diversified, not accept that, that's it. And then we said, if we take the data rolled out on the GDP every quarter by the National Bureau of Statistics, the economy is broken down into 43 sectors, then aggregated into 19. So when we look at what each sector contributes to the GDP, we then decided that let's create a pie chart that shows that pattern. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 10 years, there are 6 sectors of this economy that have accounted for between 77 and 82% of our GDP. That means those are the sectors where most value is being created locally. And they are agriculture, manufacturing, mining and quarry, ICT, trade, and real estate. Those 6 sectors. So repeatedly, quarter after quarter, those 6 sectors contribute the most to our GDP. Which means that is where most value is being created. And so, if I'm a business person, I apply it to my business as well. You know, in the latter mode. There's a point where I say we be consult. If we do this analysis, I point out to people where to look for business. Why don't we do this? In fact, that was what led us now to consulting in the agricultural space. We didn't do much in agri before until we applied ourselves to the same data we are putting out to people to understand the economy. What will this also mean for policymakers? And that's where I see the significance of central bank's anchor borrowers program. People have said all manner of things about it. But when you look at what is happening in the agri sector in Nigeria on the one hand, and look, for example, at what is happening in the rice market globally, then you discover one simple thing. 2018, Nigeria was still number 2 in the rice production metrics in Africa. Egypt was number 1. 2019, Nigeria overtook Egypt. We became the largest producer of paddy rice in 2019. And the reason is not difficult to find. One is what you did here in Nigeria through the anchor borrowers program. Second was the policy shift in Egypt, where they began to have the kind of challenge we have in Nigeria with power. And so their government said that the water from River Nile that is used to irrigate rice plantations, they should shift priority to power generation. So that way, rice cultivation in Egypt slowed down while it was being ramped up in Nigeria. So when people also saw the rice pyramid displayed in Abuja, and they said, it's a wrap. In fact, some said, no. What they did was to put plans to construct pyramid shape and just paste the bags of rice on them. I said, fine. Why don't you look at it this way? I mean, I'm an economist. If truly that was what happened, somebody supplied the plants. Somebody knot the plants together. Somebody put out his trailers to convey the materials from the farm gates to that location. And then another person supplied it to them. Some people start there, thank you. And then some people also provided trailers to move the rice back to now the processing plant. And now what is happening this month? From what we hear, the largest rice mill in Africa is to be commissioned in Lagos State. The largest single trade refinery in the world is to be commissioned in Lagos. We have a deep sea port that ranks second or third in Africa in terms of size. That's already in operation. Nobody talks about that. Okay? So we are going simply with this. We often pay attention to challenges. Let me also throw something up here that I'm sure our panelists will also deal with. We say Nigeria has revenue problem. Is it correct? We don't have revenue problem. It's an issue of priority. And if the priority was gotten right, why should we begin to blame ourselves? It's like a man having a fixed amount as income. And he chooses to say, look, I want to go for a meeting in London. I will fly with Virgin Atlantic. And I will fly upper class. Upper class is not cheap. That's a choice. And as we always say in policy formulation, and also sequence, that's what most people miss. We talk about the policy itself. We don't talk about the sequencing of the components. Which one should come before the other? That's the where priority comes in. Okay? Now, when people say, and with every sense of responsibility, I don't agree with what the World Bank says about Nigeria's economy. They post out that a lot of our revenue is going for debt servicing. Is it correct? We have currently a situation where there is an exchange of tax revenue for infrastructure. But when we lay out our revenue, we ignore that. That is also a part of the revenue. That before you compute the ratio of debt revenue to debt service to revenue, you should bring that into the conversation. They will get a ratio that is healthier than what they are positing all around. If NNPC will take 1,874 roads, and Dangote will deliver the longest concrete road in Africa, and NTN is doing the same, and several other corporates, the question should be, what is the value of the taxes these entities should ordinarily have put in the bucket? So we are computing the ratio, bring those in. They won't be talking about what World Bank is quoting about Nigeria. Because they say these things and they demoralize us and make us feel that the economy is in shambles. It is not. I did something for First Bank Commission. That was like 12 years ago. What most countries do is they don't complain about borrowing. They look at what they have done with it. So if a lot of our borrowings went to deliver the infrastructures we are talking about, how about aviation sector? The terminal buildings. How about even the power sector? I was privileged to look at the budget of one of the distribution companies. And ladies and gentlemen, I discovered that all their capital budget for last year, 2022, was to be funded by the federal government of Nigeria. But they will never tell you. Because I had to address their management at their retreat, so they had to open their documents to me. That was where I saw it. So a lot of what you see around in the power sector in terms of transformers and the rest of it are actually being funded by the federal government of Nigeria. And the same people will still come out and say the government has borrowed too much. So that's why I said, as an economist, I'm not worried that you borrowed. I'm worried only when I see what you borrowed for. Okay, what did you do with it? I was in Frankfurt some 2 years ago, if I less than 2 years ago, and the monorail in Frankfurt, Germany, I was told that Germany is still paying the note to construct that. After how many decades? I was surprised. I said, so why should I go back to Nigeria and complain that my government borrowed to do it? But that's just by the way. So it then means also that within that context, as we are speaking now, that's an issue in the US. The US government will shut down in June if they don't increase the borrowing limit from $31.7 trillion that it is now to a higher level. And that is where the issue of social divisiveness comes in. Okay? And that's talking about an understanding as of today that Republicans will never approve that should be done because they want the government to shut down other buying. Because what they are working towards now is next year, election 2024. So that's an issue also globally. It's happening everywhere. Riots in Brazil, riots in Peru, and then almost everywhere. All because of politics. There's also geopolitics. What we expect this year globally, there are flashpoints that have been identified. And that is the one between China and Taiwan, then the one between North Korea and South Korea, and then there's also the one between Russia and Ukraine. In fact, Ukraine is fighting proxy war, really. There's no Ukraine fighting. It's actually the US fighting with the Europeans. It's a proxy war. So then, there's of course the case of, India, Pakistan, that has always been there. So we are having more flashpoints in 2023 than we ever have. So the question is, if for any reason there's a flare up between China and Taiwan, how will that affect us? So yes, we recognize these things happening, but what are the implications for the global economy, and then bring it home to Nigeria, and then bring it home to your own company? So you will get a lot more in my slides, okay? But these are the high points. But the whole idea simply is to sensitize also the fact that there are challenges, quite all right, but there are also opportunities. Opportunities first underscored by our population. As of July 2022, the estimated population of Nigeria officially by United Nations was 216.7 million. Median age, 18.1 years. So depending on the nature of your business, it means if you want to be resilient to your business, you better look the way to use. There are many. So 50% of that population is below 18 years. So how do you capture them? On the other hand, and I'm sure Mr. Obaro will talk to this, how do you empower them? Because when you now look beyond that, you see also Nigeria in terms of access to internet. We are number 6 in the world. And then the other side to it is that how do we access internet, ladies and gentlemen, 90-something% on our phones? What does that mean? And of course, the conversations, even in the world of Mr. Obaro here, with respect to technology, what does metaverse mean? How is this playing out? What will this mean for your business going forward? And many other issues within that space. Okay? So, of course, if we are that many and we consume, let me say, quote and unquote, anyhow, because that's why they bring up, all they want is Nigeria to remain in market. And the fundamental thing for us to change every narrative, people around the exchange value of our currency is about production. If we produce more in Nigeria, then what we spend importing will also now be available to drive the domestic economy. So removing premium on the exchange value of the naira, it will always come back. Same thing with oil subsidy. I've been saying this in the 1990s. That remove oil subsidy today, it will come back tomorrow. I've said it to successive governments. Babangida's time, Shonekan's time, and of course, after that, Abacha kicked him out and took over. And then we had Obasanjo coming, Salami didn't spend so much, didn't even spend up to a year, and then Obasanjo came in. So all through is the same pattern. Remove subsidy, that's what we say. And how do we go measure subsidy? And this is what I want us also to bring to this course. This is the way it goes. In the pricing template of refined petroleum products, we build in efficiency, but there's a line in there for demurrage. Demurrage means the cargo arrives in Nigeria and it port discharge on time. But there's a permanent line for demurrage in the pricing template. Equally, there's a petroleum equalization fund. that says we must sell fuel the same price at the port of discharge and anywhere else in Nigeria. That is a disconnect from economic principles. So that all of that, in my own estimation, we wouldn't need to talk about that any longer once the Dangote refinery comes into operation. Want it to produce sufficient for domestic consumption and also be able to export. 650,000 barrels per day capacity. That's huge. But the other side of the connection to fresh subsidy is this. And once I mention that, I will wrap up and leave the stage. And this is the way it goes. Now, that refinery, well, as a point of information, has been exporting fertilizer since September 2021. Nobody has been exporting fertilizer from Nigeria, okay, from that complex. And now also, the final test of that refinery happened in November 2022. They call it hydraulic test. So they did that for that refinery. So as we speak, it's already doing test run production as we speak. So when the government said subsidy will go June this year, it's easy for me to interpret that they are looking at that refinery now fully in operation and producing. But one thing we need to also advise them is this: if that refinery will sell fair, and don't forget now the government also is a stakeholder because NNPC has 30% shareholding there. There are two other modular refineries that we expect to kick into operation this year, 2023. In them also NNPC has shareholding of 20% in each of them. Okay? So to that extent, therefore, it will create an opportunity in terms of pricing for one, because it will also eliminate the inbuilt cost of transporting crude offshore and importing refined products. But that cost of transportation is completely cut off. So we expect therefore all of this to come together and moderate the pump price of refined petroleum products. And more importantly, the supply. Okay? Same thing goes to aviation. That's why travel tickets are so expensive in domestic travel. Okay? That also be moderated as we begin to supply jet fuel. About 17 million liters per day. That is capacity. And of course, that will go a long way to bring some kind of moderation. So in conclusion, and this is what I recommend to everybody here in terms of looking at the economy this year. And what I put it simply, in my presentation I have some expectations I put together for 3 sectors, because I know there are experts here that will deal with different sectors of the economy. But I put some expectation for manufacturing, it will expand. Ladies and gentlemen, the data available shows that is using PMI, Policy Managers Index, that shows confidence within key sectors of the economy. They point to expansion of this economy between now and the next 6 months at the least. Because what it points to is that when that index is above 50, it means the economy is going to expand. Because it means orders have been placed at least for 6 months ahead. I know a major international player in our space, manufacturing venture, that right now is concluding building of a massive warehouse and already stockpiling maize, enough for them to produce for 9 months. But the person who handles the construction and the security systems and the tech happens to be a family friend, so I know the details. A massive warehouse being built by a manufacturing company in Shagam as we speak. So I can relate that to the data on PMI issued monthly by Stanbic IBTC. And that data also showed that in the last 25 months, ladies and gentlemen, up to December 2022, pointer is that the economy is expanding. So when you now look at the growth rate of the Nigerian economy, this service population growth rate, which has dropped from 3.2 in the last 10 years to 2.55. It means whatever anybody says about this economy, it is growing faster than the rate of growth of our population. Because the latest World Bank came out with 2 days ago is to reduce the projection for this year to 2.7%. And we said no, we don't agree with that. And this is the basis. If you check the data for January to September 2022, average growth rate of our GDP, you get 2.97%. Check historically from 1960 till date. The data of Nigeria. Don't let anybody deceive you that there's no data. I was a guest of UK government in June 2004, and I was asked to speak on the impact of oil on economic policy in Nigeria since 1960. That was in June 2004. So I had to look at data on Nigeria from 1960 till that time. So there's data in Nigeria. Don't let anybody throw that up as a reason we shouldn't, talk about what we are talking about here. So, but what that speaks to is this: that this economy has been expanding based on the PMI, and also the economy has been growing. If it grew by 2.97% in the first 3 quarters of last year, then historically, fourth quarter always is the fastest growth rate we record in the economy. You can check the data historically. So in which case, the economy must have grown. We are waiting for MBS to publish the data maybe by next month. Must have grown at a little over 3%. Which means for the year, we are likely to get something around 3.1%. That's my conservative estimate. And if that is the case, what do I expect this year? If everyone looking at the Nigerian economy talking about outlook says the economy will grow this year, but just a little less than the growth rate of 2022. So I can then make my own projection and say I see the economy growing between 3.25% and probably 3.32%. Okay? So in which case, that is what we expect this year for the reasons I mentioned. Population, consumption, of course, new investments in manufacturing, of what maybe is happening to the Chinese and the Indians. You want to see local evidence, travel Lagos by the expressway. It's not a 1 hour trip, no longer 6-7 hours. Okay? We see on both sides of that road new factories all over the place. New manufacturing in Nigeria. You wait. That a little boy that is strong can actually pick up. So there are all manner of inventions happening around the world. So how are these going to affect your own industry? And of course, the final one there, I also put something in the slides on banking and finance about constraints. So what is my conclusion? Don't ignore the dynamics of the environment where we operate. I mentioned the issue of population. There's also rapid urbanization. More people in Nigeria now are living in urban areas than in the last 5 years. 5-6 years ago, about 51%, okay, but about 52%. Now, 5 years ago, 47.94%. So there's migration more to urban areas. So what does that mean for your business? And how do you take advantage of that? Of course, I'm talking about deepening internet penetration. There's strengthening innovation culture. And of course, strongly evolving payment infrastructure. More Nigerians are now making payments for the virtual platform than hitherto. And it is in the character of growth that will learn from both pleasant and unpleasant experiences. Which means all of these parts, frameworks, interpretations, expectations, innuendos, whatever you want to call it. What do they mean for you? Some are pleasant, some are unpleasant. But what are we learning from them? How will my own company survive? What do I need to do? So as we say now, I'm sure the central bankers will tell me that in the central banking space, we no longer talk about orthodox monetary policy tools. We talk about pragmatism. So when people say central bank is doing this, why should it? I say it's very simple. What should the central bank do? They say CIBN is defending the naira. I say what else should they do? They shouldn't defend naira. They should defend the dollar. Every central bank governor anywhere in the world is charged primarily with two things: the value of the currency domestically, that's also inflation. We call it inflation targeting in central banking language. The second thing is the exchange value of the currency. So CBN will use both orthodox and unorthodox tools to do any of those two. That is what is happening all over the world.
Solution providers. And then it's a good thing that it's going to be communicated at the end of this debate. And we just hope that policymakers who are in a position to implement the content of the communique will do justice. Now, we've listened to the speakers, the president, and then the doctor, Dr. Adedipe. Now, give us a quick, a cursory perspective on how we can maximize the opportunities or have a trade-off between the challenges he has enumerated and the opportunities that are found. If you like, shall we say, SWOT analysis, a quick SWOT analysis of the Nigerian economic situation vis-a-vis the global trends.
The challenges they face, and we also see the opportunities that some of these guys have come up with. Now, for example, the agri sector, which for us as an institution, maybe I'm dragging it into here, we have a very robust agri desk. One of the things that we've seen in prior years, we realized that banks did not have full grasp of the sectors in which customers were paying, but that has over time changed. For example, our agri desk is headed by someone who is Zimbabwean, and in Zimbabwe, for example, their whole rule is you can't work as an agri desk of a bank if you don't have a background in agriculture. We're seeing that change across the industry. We realize now that if I'm banking a cocoa farmer, the structure is different from if I'm dealing with maybe a manufacturer. We see a lot of opportunities in the agri sector, even though they have their attending challenges of logistics, getting their security is probably the biggest issue, as they have to deal with farmer error crisis, which I would say is still underreported. The challenge is bigger than what some of us living in the urban areas are aware of. Secondly, for them is even after they have their produce, moving these things to the market.
The figures being reported. I just want to talk on a few things I think can also help when citizens are able to connect with the government. Because what happens is people just think I have to take care of myself and living a parallel life. Government is taking a different on a different route. Elections are coming in 2023 in a few days' time, about 40 days' time. And one of the things that we need to do is to ensure that the current momentum, where many people feel they want to participate, that is not happened. I want to speak, for instance, to collection of voters' cards. You have voters, people are cleaning in their millions, they want to vote, but they can't get their cards. And from a system point of view, I'm looking at it that, wait a minute, why do we need voters' card in the first place? Do you need voters' cards to be able to vote? And my answer is no. And I still believe that can happen between now and the next 40 days. Why am I saying so? Today, we are all familiar with our ATM cards. You use it where there is a POS. If you want to buy online, you key in the number and it gives the same access. The same thing. INEC, if they really want to do it, it's just a few days' work at most, to be able to allow people whose names are on the register, people who have the reference number, key in the reference number, it brings up all his details. You verify his identity, which is the same thing that the card is supposed to achieve. If you're able to do that, you'll be able to get more of the 93 million on the voters register to participate in the election. When the government comes into power, that government comes in with the confidence that it has a mandate of the populace. That government is in a better position to take some very hard decisions that need to be taken, such as fuel subsidy has to go. Now, one other thing, I know time is, we need to look at being able to expand the broadband. You now have things like Starlink, which makes it easier for people in rural communities to be able to come on board. We need to improve broadband. Broadband is a basic infrastructure now, especially as we're beginning to talk cashless. For the cashless to be able to really work, we need to make it easy for communications to happen even in the rural communities. CIBN has banned withdrawal above a certain limit. NFIU said in the last, between 2015 and 2022, about 1 billion naira was withdrawn in cash from government agencies. Now, that's a lot of money. Now, if you want to be able to keep track of spending and all of that, those are some of the things that need to be challenged. Yesterday, the CBN launched a Naira card. I don't know how many of us are aware of that. Now, if it is well implemented, as we hope it will also help government to be able to enforce some of the things we currently want to enforce, but a little more difficult to enforce. For instance, you say people can only withdraw a certain amount or make certain transactions, and all you need to do is go across multiple banks. And if you get cards of different banks, you're able to circumvent whatever those rules are. But with a centralized coordination of this, it can become easier to monitor theft. I see a future where, let me just talk again briefly about education. Let me talk briefly about education. Education needs to be ramped up because we need a lot of skills and manpower across different sectors of the industry. And the few people who have been developed, competent people, as soon as they get the necessary experience, Japa, as Doctor already said, the Japa immediately, we need to build a pipeline to be able to keep filling this. Now, not just that, because some of the people are living with institutional memories. They are living with experience. They are living with competencies. And these are some of the challenges that we need to speak to as a nation. And unfortunately, as we stand, it's not just individuals that are Japan. Companies are even Japan too. Okay, so you have Game, ShopRite, Truworks, many of these other airlines, they are moving out of the country. Okay, we need to have something in place to be able to refill this. You can argue that the devaluation of the Naira may also make it easier for foreign investors to be able to come on board. Work from home is another challenge that has come upon us, like my predecessor said. Unfortunately, work from home is no more than sleep from home. When you are on this side of the divide as an employer, you will know that it comes with a big challenge. You call people now, they are probably in the market. Okay, you'll be hearing all the horns blaring. Okay, I don't know how we're going to solve it, but I see a future where there will be more of hostels, more of combined accommodation and office. If you're able to put them together in a place, which may mean relocating to outside Lagos for many organizations where accommodation will be cheaper. So,
I'll still come back to you. Thank you.